everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and welcome back to my 3-ish part series about the new formats that Konami has debuted. So, if you're unfamiliar, let me just bring you up to speed. A couple of days ago, Konami released a piece of paper that contains rule sets for a ton of alternative formats that they will be sanctioning at the OTS level. I'm aiming to get you up to snuff on each of these formats before they debut, so you can be the most prepared person at your local and look like the sweatiest tryhard that came to a casual night. Today we're going to be talking about... what are we talking about? Deckmaster, and... this one's broken. So here are the rules for Deckmaster, and just reading from the press release here. Based on the Yu-Gi-Oh anime arc where Noah Kaiba brought Yugi and his friends into a virtual world to duel, each duel allowed the duelist to select a Deckmaster to help them in multiple ways, and who can forget that wonderful anime arc. Duelists begin each match by selecting a monster to serve as a Deckmaster. The Deckmaster begins each game outside of the deck. Any effects of the monster apply as if the monster were face up on the field. Duelists can normal summon the Deckmaster to the field, ignoring any summoning requirements. Anytime they would be able to normal summon a monster. No tributes are required for high-level monsters. No materials are needed for fusion, synchro, Xyz, or link monsters, and if the Deckmaster is destroyed, the duelist loses the game. So basically, it's like Commander in Magic the Gathering, except static abilities of the Commander are always active. So as you may have expected, this is not a sufficient introduction to Deckmaster format. There is a lot of weirdness that is not resolved by these couple of paragraphs. How do effects work? Can you trigger effects, or are the Deckmasters just kind of field spells whose continuous effects are always live? What does destroyed mean? If I pick a monster that can't be destroyed by card effects and then my opponent tributes over it with a kaiju, have I lost the game? Have I engineered a scenario in which I cannot ever lose the game because of Deckmaster rules? What happens to the cards that leave the field but aren't destroyed? What happens if you compulse a monster that should go to the extra deck if it's returned to your hand and you have a 15-card extra deck? Can you sideboard Deckmasters? This one's extremely important because a significant amount of Deckmasters are very, very, very difficult to play around unless you have access to silver bullets out of your side deck, which you could have if you are allowed to board them. As written, these rules are arcane at best and incomprehensible at worst. It turns out you can't just say, there's a command zone, and assume that Yu-Gi-Oh players are going to infer the rest. So, given a loose understanding of the rules, what's going to be good and what can we expect to be played? Well, first things first, I do need to warn you, this format is terrible. No answers to the above questions about rules is going to be sufficient. There's no way an additional ban list would resolve these problems because the card pool is too expansive. After 20 years, there simply are just too many monsters with busted continuous effects. You can just go down a list as individual ones are removed from sanctioned play. There's never going to be a time that this format is actually fun to play. But you're not here to have fun. That's why you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! So let me tell you what's going to be good. First up, the last warrior from another planet. And that's it. That's pretty much all that's going to be good until this card is banned. It prevents both players from summoning monsters, and unfortunately this does prohibit flip summons, so you can't get around it with a Guru deck like you could for Red Eye's Fusion. You just have to sit and look at your opponent and set individual cards so you don't die. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can take this deck. You can play Burn, you can play Exodia, but no matter what you're doing, it is going to be exceptionally unfun. Now, your opponent can counter your strategy if you're playing Burn with something like DD Rebel King Leonidas. Let me actually check if that's the right card before I say this on camera. DDD. Oh, good thing I checked. Now, given what type of strategy you're aiming for with the last warrior from another planet, you might be able to counter your opponents by playing a Deckmaster like DDD Rebel King Leonidas, so you're never burned out of the game. But without the ability to board Deckmasters, this is a rough call. Vanity's Ruler. This is just Vanity's Emptiness, except it's one-sided and it never dies. Inspector Border. Playing this in a normal summon control deck seems pretty unbeatable if the above cards are banned as well. Jinzo and Spell Canceller. Based on the type of deck your last warrior opponent is playing, these may make the matchup an auto-win, provided you're playing 41 cards. For example, if they're on something like a Spell Burn deck that includes Wave Motion Cannon, then Spell Canceller is functionally going to win the game on its own. If they're on a Trap Burn deck that plays cards like Secret Barrel, well, you just have to land the Jinzo Continuous and there's nothing they can do about it. Amano Iwado. Light and Darkness Dragon. Now, I really like this one. I think it's a sleeper hit, depending on some rules questions. If monsters in the Deckmaster zone don't retain stats, this is Infinity Negates. If they do, it's fewer, but either way, it's going to get you one hell of a judge call. And finally, Malefic Blue Eyes White Dragon. This is the perfect Deckmaster for players who want to play as little Deckmaster format as possible. Now, if none of these seem like fun, interesting matchups, now, there's some other silly crap you can do in the format, playing unsearchable FTK enablers in your Deckmaster zone and stuff like that, but really that's just asking to ruin the game in a slightly different way than normal. So in conclusion, this format is irrevocably broken from day one. Before you play it at your OTS, you're going to have a frank discussion with both the owner and your playgroup as to what cards should or should not be allowed, which cards will get your kneecaps broken, and which will get you permanently banned from your LGS. Functionally, this is going to be a self-regulating format. Probably the first couple of weeks will be dominated by sweaty tryhards who all bring Last Warrior from another planet, and the following weeks will be dominated by individuals playing pet decks who shout down anyone who has the balls to show up with some burn deck. It's a fun side event for individuals at an OTS to play after they're done scythe-locking their opponent, but realistically it doesn't have the legs to be an interesting Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience. So that's Deckmaster. The Last Warrior buyout begins now. I think a funny thing for the outro is me fucking up the word irrevocably a bunch of times.